Good morning, good afternoon, good day, good day. As I think is going to become very popular, the Australians are going to take over the world with the good days. As we're now on a quite international call. But yeah, good day. Welcome to Coffee with Centuro. I'm here again with Siraj, obviously from Centuro Global.
Hey.
Good morning, and we've got a special guest, one of our global founding partners covering the sort of legal sector. We've got Parinita Chahal. Parinita, good morning. Welcome to your first episode with us of Coffee with Centuro.
Thank you so much for having me on this episode today. It was quite exciting to hear that I'd be featured, so I'm very happy to be here. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
Yes.
Do you want to give people a 15-second introduction to yourself? Who are you? What do you like to do with your time?
Yes, for sure. So, as Ben mentioned, my name is Parinita Chahal. I am a transactional corporate commercial lawyer in Toronto, Ontario, based here for now. I also do a lot of work in the international law, transactional law space. What do I like to do with my time? I like to read a lot. I read a lot of self development material, actually. And I do like to travel a lot, which is not happening right now. So I'm making
Then
the
you
best
get to
use
do
of it.
more reading then.
Yeah,
Yeah, totally. Yes. And
one can
I just love
compensate for the
learning.
other. Yeah.
I mean, I love learning. So for me, it's like something or the other. Like I always have a project going on the side. So yeah, it's given me
Yeah.
time
So,
to do that.
Perenita, what's currently on your bedside table? What you reading?
I am reading three different books. One is a Japanese spiritual book. It's called Ikigai, I think. And then there's, I don't know if you know about Sadhguru. He is a mystic like teacher in India. Yeah, that's another like it's a profound book he's written or someone's written about him. So I'm reading that, and at the same time, I'm actually also reading The Intelligent Investor. That's been on my list for quite some time by Benjamin Graham. So that's what I'm reading right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you
It's
and you and I know it's not got nothing to do with the topics today, Ben, but you interchange these just as in if it gets slightly boring, pick the next one up. I've always struggled to have multiple books going at the same time. I want to finish something and
Yeah.
move on.
It happens. But you're right. Like sometimes the material I'm reading, I just like I'm like, okay, it's getting boring now. I need to switch it up a little bit. So I have at least like 20 books on my little Kindle where I can just go back and forth, and it just stores your pace.
Yeah.
So good.
Might be the
Okay.
way to do it. I found some self-help books
Yeah.
slow to get through at times just because it is like a learning thing you're doing, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes you just want to read not to necessarily learn, just to sort of escape. And the other thing I was going to say is interesting how overlapping the spirituality and that sort of thing is becoming such a part of entrepreneurship as well. I just finished Awareness by Anthony D'Amelio as well, and that's all just about being self-aware, but then how it ties into business is so interesting. And quite often on podcasts you hear a lot of high functioning sort of entrepreneurs sort of
Right.
talking about how important that side is. So yeah, it's quite interesting. I'll try to segue this straight into our first one with another sort of high functioning, high net worth individual with Elon Musk. And today's thing comes as there's a bit of competition between Tesla and Lucid.
Sorry, I'm just cheering over here because he's South African. I have to
uh,
we just
yeah,
take a little bit of credit where we can,
yeah,
right? So,
Yeah.
yeah,
okay,
Why not?
perfect.
why not? Why not?
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys know Lucid as a company. So they do electric vehicles. They struggled a little while. A couple of the guys came out of Tesla and became the CTO and so forth. But it was interesting. They struggled to get funding because everyone was just assuming self-driving cars, robo taxis is the next step, and they were trying to argue, no, electric cars haven't even made their mark yet, and they're aiming to be the Mercedes S-Class of electric cars, high end, and they ended up getting $1 billion from the Saudi sovereign wealth fund and so forth. But what I found quite interesting was they just dropped the price of their standard new vehicle they're coming out with. And immediately in response, Elon Musk reduced the price of the Tesla S-Class as well. He reduced it to $69,420. So connect those two numbers in your head as a joke. and it's very intentional that it was 69,420, which obviously goes out into the meme culture and becomes a bit of a marketing ploy because everyone's going to be going, he, Elon Musk priced his car as 69,420. So what made me think about that was just the interest, I guess, in characters in these sort of leadership roles. And, I think the article I saw it in was like, because he's a child and people like sort of judging it, but everyone's going to start talking about it. I was wondering if you guys thought we should have more of this sort of character or playfulness in the sort of leadership, because you quite often think at that level, people are very professional. You can almost predict everything they're going to say to the letter of the, to the book and so forth. Would you want to see more character in leadership? And I suppose one example of it could be like a Trump or someone mixing it up and throwing a complete wrench in the works. Do you think, would it be more interesting times if Mark Zuckerberg was a bit more crazy with what he was up to, or Sanjay Patel with Google and so forth, that were just blasting out funny tweets all the time?
Well, I mean, I can let Suraj go first, but I will quickly just say that for me, I think when it comes to entrepreneurs, I think they already have an established kind of character personality. I think when it comes to marketing, that's more of building a connection. And I think Elon Musk has always had that kind of he always has that personality or character in anything he does that kind of engages the future kind of generations. So the people who are, getting into the markets in the sense of consumers or even as talent. They want to work for somebody like that. They want to engage with somebody like that, or they just want to see what he's doing and just follow him as not just as an entrepreneur, I think just as a celebrity even in certain things. So when I can see when you said the price is a certain way, certain people connect with it, certain kind of generations connect with it. But big picture, I think whatever's happening in that industry, it's great. It's a very I don't see it as a competition per se. I see it as a very healthy competition. And I think we did a webinar, which Suraj and I actually organized for Competition. It's very much in line with something like that. I think one company is catering to a certain kind of consumer when it comes to luxury. For example, Lucid Air has more focus on luxury, and then Tesla, I think, has more to do with making it more affordable for everyday consumers to have access to something like that. So I think it's a healthy way of doing it. But yeah, you're right. Entrepreneurs, obviously, when it comes to marketing and building relationships with people, yes, you have to stand out some way.
I mean, if you think of Richard Branson, used to be the crazy guy, right? So I mean, he still is to a certain extent, but it's about that he's a great marketer. I actually think that in the same way, and I'm not speaking Trump up by any means, because I'm most definitely not a fan, but you never know if they're dumb or very clever in what they're doing, because I think everything they do is orchestrated and planned. Even with Elon Musk, I think he smoked some weed on a radio station or something like that.
Podcast.
And on a podcast. And I think it's about getting into the limelight. It's about getting in there. I'd never heard of Lucid Air before today when you mentioned we're going to chat about it. I researched it, and immediately the first video that came up was their CEO sitting there, but he was just the old school CEO that I wouldn't actually associate with this modern new brand, which I think there is a time, there is a space for the young, the hip, the crazy within an environment with that. Whether your investors feel the same way or not is another thing. You want to do that, but I think that. Perenita, I'm not sure if you were at the Collision conference last year in Toronto. I was there. It was and there was a lot of talk about investors and how they invest in people. A lot of the times they're investing in the founder more than they're investing in the idea. Right. So the more eccentric, the more crazy, it's not always a bad thing. And then just on that co-opetition thing again, I mean, probably 18 months or 2 years ago, Elon Musk actually opened up all his patents for his batteries. I don't know if you know this. So he made it, he opened it up and he said, come and take it, use it, and everything else. But he did that because he has a massive battery factory.
Right.
So if he can grow the industry, then he's winning on another side, and the whole industry advances automatically. And I think there's a lot to be said about these new vehicles coming in. Just I think if it's that competition that pushes you forward,
Right.
and I think it's really good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Brings a lot of innovation. And I mean, it took Lucid 3 years to convince people to give them enough money to set up their own factory. So I guess there's some safety in being so far ahead as well of the race. It's like, cool, now you can try chase me down if you want. Sticking to the sort of autonomous one and a little bit that here for Paranita as well. So Toronto is just about to trial their automated shuttle buses.
Right.
So driving through the street. In the outer suburbs of Toronto, it's going to connect a sort of suburban area into one of the main train stations to then that which then supports the longer transport. Interestingly, I saw it was on a TV show. I don't watch a lot of TV. I actually saw it come up on LinkedIn because there was a UK company that are doing automated vehicles, and he happened to be on the show, and the first thing one of the speakers said was, "Ooh, self-driving cars, that's a bit scary for me." And almost they were sitting down, but almost would have backed off if they could. I was wondering if you think people will react the same way to self-driving public transport, because I guess a self-driving car feels more personal, right? That's what's going to get you everywhere. But do you think people will have the same issue with going and jumping on the equivalent of like a little tram and so forth? Because these shuttle buses can only take up to 8 people, so they're not massive in any way. Do you think the public will sort of react the same way? Would you be more comfortable using self-driving as public transport and stick to having your own manual car?
So I will like to say, again, looking at the big picture, I think it's a good innovative advancement for, again, the transport industry. And we have needed something like this in a city like Toronto, because it's not just Toronto that we kind of engage with. It's GTA, which is the Greater Toronto Area. So there's a lot of people who work, in different areas of GTA and live in different areas. But yes, there is a good transit system, which is the GO Transit or the Metrolink system. However, there's still the problem of traffic everywhere because they have to drive from their home to that station. Somehow they have to get there. And those are the worst because people are in a rush and everybody's trying to get to work at a certain time, and it's really bad. And I also know that a lot of the younger generation or the younger people who go to schools outside of their little jurisdictions in the sense of their homes, they also need proper safe transit. It's not like school buses picking them up and taking them to universities or colleges and things like that. So I think they'd be more open to doing something like that. Again, it comes back to the fact that it's the younger generation that's already into these things and is already excited about these things. So I don't think it's necessarily the parents we'll see getting into that at this point, at least. And especially the area they're trying it in, which is east of the GTA area. It's mostly families. It's not, young professionals who are living in downtown and don't really need transit at the end of the day. But it's families who have children who are growing up and will need access to better transit. And like anything, it's a new innovation. At first, it's scary. Then people get used to it. Some people just take, the chance, and it just becomes everyday practices, like anything else. So I think that's really what's going to happen.
Well, one of the things that I've always been interested in, I fly quite a lot, and with the advent of drones and remote control, it's always this thought of would an airplane ever be just flown automatically, right? Because most of the times, a lot of the landing and the taking off can be done automatically. But I always kind of have this thing of I'm a little bit safer because the person flying in it, if something goes wrong, they're also going to die. And maybe that's a very morbid way of thinking about it, but it's kind of, they're not going to take any chances because they're sitting in front and they're actually also in danger. Whereas if they weren't there, I would be questioning like, oh, how safe am I here? It's like, how much, like, have they really checked that wing? And I don't know if that plays the same way in a autonomous driving shuttle or bus.
Yeah.
I'm now getting into this thing where there's no one driving it. Who do I blame or anything else? I don't know, but then again, I do have more gray hair than you guys, and maybe I am one of those older guys that you were talking about, Perenita. I
No,
don't know.
by no means did I. I didn't mean to say that at all.
Yeah.
But I did read somewhere that they're going to have technicians on board at all
Yeah.
times.
Okay.
So I think it's not completely like autonomous, and that is the scary piece, right? Like obviously, even for parents, they're not going to let their kids do something like that. But I feel like it's they have to start somewhere. So they're going to provide enough technicians at first to at least be able to handle if anything happens, and then slowly people will just get over it.
Yeah,
Like
I think especially because one of the reasons they've done this first compared, because like fully self-driving cars are going to take ages to get on the road. You're going to have to insure them, prove they're safer, and public perception of it and so forth. But the shuttle buses move a lot slower, and they're not going all over the city. They're going on a very specific route, so they can learn that route with a lot less memory data and so forth, and be very specific about and get programmed to do that route rather than have to try create an AI that can handle every single situation. So yeah, I was thinking about it. The London DLR, one of the train services here, is already driverless, and there's just a technician walking around, and while he's not driving, he comes and checks your tickets, and that's part of what he does, is go up and down, do the announcements, but then they can walk up to the front and show a panel and take over if need be. So that's obviously on a set rail system, but it's got to pull up, let people in, take off again, and so forth all by itself. So there's already examples of it happening, where I wonder if some of the people who first think about, oh, I don't want to be in a self-driving vehicle, I wonder if they're jumping on the DLR just without thinking about it in London.
I didn't know it was self-driving when I was there in January. I was
yeah.
I was
You can sit at the front and watch it take you to Canary Wharf. We'll get you a ride when you come back over, Suraj.
Nice.
So this is my transition. So from taking drivers out of the vehicles, Apple are taking their chargers and headphones out of their phone boxes. So that works, right? So yeah, obviously
a good transition. I like it.
Thank you. So Apple's new phones, iPhone 12, are coming out, and they've obviously some level of controversially, but some have applauded that they're no longer providing chargers and headphones by default when you buy a new phone. Apple have said there's 700 million wired earpods in rotation out there with consumers, and 2 billion chargers. And that's not including third party, that's their own product. And people just sort of hoard the chargers and so forth, and have been collecting them. So that's part of the reason they're saying, like, this is just environmentally bad for us to keep producing these. Our phone users have chargers. They have enough. They have AirPods and so forth, so we don't need to put them in there. The other impact it will also have is, without having to put that in the box and making the box smaller, they can get 70% more phones per shipping container. So they'll use a lot less shipping around the world as well. So there's been a lot of people joking. Obviously, iPhone has always been the one to first take out the headphone jack, and then they were the first to remove the home button. And it's got the bitter reputation if they just keep stripping out things, and then they make you buy them back anyway. So there was that sort of joke after the event, but then obviously all the environmentalists were sort of like, yes, they're going in the right direction. There's no need to keep producing these little bits of electronics on mass scale, and so forth. So are you guys pro not getting a charger? Are you worried that you won't have a new set of headphones when you buy your iPhone, if you're an iPhone user? Or
again, I'm gonna go first.
You go.
I just have a lot to say on this. I feel like I'm pro sustainability through and through, and I'm very anti wastage, whether it's food, whether it's electronics, whether it's anything, any kind of resources. So I do agree with, yes, the fact that we have all just become very lazy and very spoiled, in the sense of, we need a charger in every room, we need a charger in our car, we need a charger at work. Like, we just need those things everywhere. We can't just carry the same thing in a bag. Like, there's ways to reduce that wastage as well. So I do think what they're saying in that regard, yes, I agree with that. But then I think they're also creating a situation where someone who buys the phone will actually have to go and buy that charger, in case that charger they had is lost, or something happened, or the dog ate it, or something like that happened. So I feel like that is there's kind of like a balance I think they'll have to kind of create at some point. Otherwise, customers might as well just, will probably just, and not the fan base, obviously, they do have an existing fan base, but I feel like other consumers might just, move away from Apple if that's the case, because our lives have become as such. Like, people are not willing to change their habits. People are not willing to change. It's very few people who are looking at, a sustainable future and want to do something for the planet or for the people or any, for profit as well. But I think that's going to create a little bit of there will be some stuff fans will have to say about this. So I'm waiting to see what happens.
So let me test the universality of this. Is that, do you have a drawer in your house where when you open it up, it just has old chargers and boxes and cell phones? I mean, I think we all have that, right? Like we all have that drawer that is just totally filled with it. What I'm always interested about, and I'm also for sustainability, and I'm very happy that people start thinking about this triple bottom line, right? So it's kind of you're trying to impact the surroundings as well, but they are definitely trying to fix the problem that they most definitely created themselves.
Yeah.
Because for a long time, Apple were one of the ones that every single new version has a different jack to go into the phone. Why didn't they just leave it the way it was,
Or switch to universal with
just
Android.
Just do the universal. I mean, Android also changed fairly recently. I'm an Android guy, but I had one charger that could work on all different phones, Android phones for a while, and then my latest Note 10 has got a new little one, but then that's going to be the new little one, right? That can be there. I think they're trying to fix their own problem they created, and then trying to take the higher ground to say, oh, we're being all sustainable.
Yeah. It's a little bit, hey, look over here, we're being sustainable. Oh, and we're going to get 40 quid per charger over here. I wonder if, and I should have looked into it, but I didn't check the new pricing or anything. Because if buying a charger is, say, 30, 40 pounds, has the price dropped 30, 40 pounds? And then they'll argue, it's not exactly that amount, right? Because shipping and blah, 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 we're still shipping it to you. But have they even knocked off 10 or 20? I imagine it's the same price.
It is. They have, because I was looking at, they released the prices recently, even though the phone was kind of delayed, but there's no change really for US and Canada, at least.
I interestingly saw part of something, and I don't know if it was a joke or if Samsung actually released it, but it was like a poster or just something to go online of Samsung, and it was just a picture of a charger, and it's saying this is included with our phones or something, and it's obviously trying to take a dig. But I did almost think, obviously thinking, because I just read the article about all the environmentalists saying it's great, I'm like, is that almost going to look bad when that becomes the new norm of them going, hey, look, we're throwing this in, and like, oh, that's not very sustainable now I think about it, that you're like, it's a short jab in the short term, and people, and the comment I saw on a website or something was like, oh, Samsung being savage or something to Apple and whatnot. But then I'm like, oh, it's not sustainable, is it? I have 3 chargers. I have one here, I have one that goes with me in a bag, and one at my partner's place. But rightly so, if I buy a new phone, I still have these 3. I don't need the next one, I guess.
Apple's been really good in that they very early on took away the big manual, didn't they? That nobody reads. So when you get the iPhone, there's no little book in 57 languages that no one ever reads. That is just killed. You just killed 3 trees for that. Thank you, Samsung. So I do feel that they have been ahead of the game when it comes to that. I think minimalism and simplifying things is the way to go in a cluttered world anyway. And marketing is such a it's such an interesting thing, is that what do you want to dig at, right? So if you be careful what you want to dig at, because nowadays everything lives forever, and don't let that come back and hit and kick you in your own butt later on, And I think I think you're right that Samsung need to be careful on how they play that.
Yeah, exactly. So from from missing headphone jacks to missing people in working from home.
Continue, sir.
Yeah,
I'm
we're
getting
getting there. I'm trying. So the other one's sort of taking us a little bit to obviously the remote working situation we're all in and so forth, and it was an article around encouraging people to take their sick leave, because obviously even pre-COVID you'd get the case of people would still come into the office because they're afraid of taking a sick day, either from bosses who are very bad about letting people take sick days and so forth, or just even people just not wanting to fall behind on their work and so forth. So there's a term for it I've learned apparently, which is sickness presenteeism, which is when someone tries to keep doing their work. And obviously we've now got the case of so many more people working from home, but they're still working through their sickness, so they can still get they're not using up their paid sick days. If they have paid sick days is one thing you have to consider in some places as well. We're luckily not in that position, but it's something to do. And then so this article was saying it had some really good points for it. There's a lot of people with long-term chronic illnesses that are really benefiting from being able to work from home and cut out the commute, because they can get on with their day, and whereas before it would probably stop them going into work quite often. But it was also looking at just sort of the average person and working through the cold and the flu and so forth, doing it at home because they can still cut out the commute and do it. But there was some interesting sort of findings. There's been quite a long-term study where they followed the same employees for quite a while. They should have made a documentary about it. Would have just been called The Office, I guess. But that's a weird side note. Why didn't they do that? So going to work when you're sick and not taking your sick days, it showed an increase that while you pushed through and got there, it increased your risk of getting ill again or further illness, even up to 18 months later. Wow. So if you weren't stopping and resting and recovering when you should be, it was having a long impact. And then they also looked at the mental health as well, and found that people that just sort of pushed through the sickness and kept working even while at home, they became more irritable. They also found it harder to make decisions, and that was up to 3 months after working through it, so that it wasn't just an immediate, oh, I'm still in recovery, or I'll be good in a couple of days. The mental impact was still there. And then they even found that it led to an increase in depression up to 2 years later. That people kept, that they were, even if they weren't depressed at the time, they were then tracking it for these people for that sort of long, and found there was an increase in depression of the people who pushed through and kept working through their sickness and illness. So the article was saying companies need to start, especially obviously adapting to this remote working time, really encouraging people to take the time off, whether that's their holiday, but also obviously take the sick day as well. If you're not feeling well, you might be tempted to grab the laptop and just sit in bed and do your emails, but you really need to do that. I was just curious if what you guys thought might be, how would you guys encourage people to do it, or what do you think would encourage you to take the time off, or had you thought about it in that way?
You want to go for it, Perinita? Or?
This time I'm going to let you go first.
Okay. No, many moons ago I worked for Shell Oil, and don't hold it against me, Perinita, because it's not a sustainable company. But okay. That's why I don't work for them anymore. But they at the time, they had part of the number of days you took. You had to take 10 consecutive days. You had to take that. You couldn't take your 20 days that you got for the year and dot it every Friday here and there, because there's enough research and studies that says you actually have to totally unwind when it comes to this. So that's not even sick leave. That's just your actual that's just your vacation leave. But I think there's a much bigger picture to this, which is this whole, it goes back to the age-old, you have to be seen to be doing the work and not just about results. And I'm all for, if you can leave early if you want, as long as you've done your work and you've gotten through it. Don't sit there and pretend to be working when you're actually on social media, just so that you don't leave before the boss. And I think all of that kind of filters into this, where I need to be strong, yet all you're doing is coming in, and besides all the impacts that you said, and that's very interesting that it can impact you, and besides all the, but you're just going to make everyone else sick, right?
Yeah.
You're just going to, it's just one of the very noticeable things this year is that my household, because I have little kids, we've just had much less sickness in the house because when they are like little virus collectors when they go to school, and they weren't going to school in lockdown, and we were just all generally a lot healthier. It's just, and I do hope that these are some of the things that come out of the crisis, is that we just operate at a different level when it comes to that. But we still have a lot of managers instead of leaders who kind of manage, excuse the, but people manage instead of output driven.
It's also sort of looking at the short term, right, as well, and going, look, I had none of my team came in sick for this quarter or whatever, and then there's the pressure on that. But I think that's the point of this, putting it to the long term, is like, sure, you forced your team to not take their sick days by being a crack the whip boss, but those employees are now going to all be sick in 18 months again when they could have just dealt with it now, kind of thing. How do you find it in the legal profession, I guess, because you've got quite a lot of often quite a time sensitive job as well. Do you find you push through the sickness, Parinita?
I think this whole situation that happened back in March when Kent, like at least Toronto first went into like its first lockdown, I think a lot of the big firms, like even when I live downtown and work downtown, so when I look around, and sometimes I still go to the office because I'm by myself there and I can still go in and there's not people there that could be causing all that social distancing problems. But when I go in, it's still pretty dead. Like there's nobody there. All the big firms are pretty much like shut down in the sense that they're only taking meetings if they need to come in. They're meeting with people in meeting rooms, when big boardrooms, only if somebody needs to come in. So I feel like people have been forced to experience that. There was always a possibility to do that. People were just very comfortable in the ways they were working. And I feel like this has actually caused them to, how change sometimes brings, not sometimes, I believe it brings good, positive results all the time. Like change is actually growth. So I think that this actually pushed people to realize that this is doable. You don't have to be present in the office 24/7, slogging, and it affects your mental health, like Ben mentioned. Like, I think that's the most important piece that people forget. That someone's mental health is going to be the most, long-term sort of asset that person has. Like a mentally healthy individual is going to obviously produce more in the long run. So I think a lot of the firms ended up realizing that, especially in the legal industry. It's been very difficult for the courts to, acclimatize to all of this. But so many of the courts now are in Toronto or actually in Ontario, have now started their online filing systems. Again, something that needed to be done a long time ago, but they're being forced to do it now. So I personally think that it's doable, yes. And I think 4-day work weeks should just be the norm everywhere in any case. It's just, happier, healthier people is what the goal should be. But if this is the reality of life, I think you can work from anywhere. It doesn't matter. And as Suraj had mentioned, it's about the output. It shouldn't really be about it's the quality of work you're producing, not the quantity necessarily, and also not slogging yourself through it. Then you're not being creative, you're not being innovative. And why would you want to work with somebody like that? Or why would you want to be somebody that does that? Like you're not really being creative or, exploring your potential, then I don't think you're being useful.
Yeah.
So
I guess one of the best ways people can sort of encourage staff to, because it's a mental shift, right? Like we all, in Suraj's point of what's the universality of some of this stuff, and the idea of I have to be strong and go into work even if I've got a bit of a cold or something. Like we've all got that across the world right here, just in this chat. So there's obviously a mental perception there of that, and I guess one way people need to start breaking it is, as Suraj said, have managers, have your leaders sort of encourage you and understand and maybe vocalize the fact that you're more valuable to me in the company if you go and take your sick day. So don't come in. And obviously we used to be able to get this a little bit more when people coming into an office. If you had a good manager, they saw you were sick, they'd say, no, off you go home, rest. Yeah. But they can't do that now while you're at home. But they just need to go. It's valuable for me if you go sleep right now. That's how you can contribute to me and my business. Because then you'll be a better version of yourself, and then you'll be more valuable that way. And then if the staff sort of think that way and go, all right, actually, it's not it's not a weakness that I'm going to recover right now from. I am actually still helping my company by recovering and taking that time. Might be a way to sort of shift it. I had made a note that sorry, go.
No, just that you know, when you're training for sport, even the top athletes have to take a rest day. They have it's part of the training, right? You train legs, you train body, whatever you're doing, and then you take a rest day. It's kind of part of the program. You're not being lazy, you're not being weak. It's none of that. It's actually part of the program so that you can continue to go. The problem is that the outliers, which you do, I don't know if you guys have ever had it, but you get these people who just use, if I get 10 sick days, I'm going to use all 10 sick days for the year because it's owed to me. It's almost like it's a right that you have to use. Now, leave, vacational leave is one thing, but I don't know about in other countries. Here you get sick leave that is there for you to use, but if you don't use it, it's no benefit to you. So some people just say, well, then I'm going to use it, and I'm going to be away on a Friday and a Monday often, and they just spoil everything for everyone else, don't they?
Or the old, I'm going to go out and have a few pints on a Wednesday, and if I just call in sick on the Thursday, it'll be fine. I got 5 sick days.
Yeah,
that's you.
But that goes down to employment standards and rules and regulations everywhere, right? Like governments can totally do this. What is the problem? It's so simple as like, saying, okay, everybody has to take these, but do it in a certain way. I feel like the Employment Standards Act that we have in Ontario is very, very stringent when it comes to taking sick leave or vacation days or whatever. Like the definition is very clear. That's all you can do. But who says you can't expand that definition, right? Like it has to come from, I think, the place of authority in the sense that everybody just has to follow it, right? In a good way. And I think the lobbying is against it because people want other people working for them and slogging for them so that they can just do whatever else they need to do, right? I think that mentality also has to do, right? I think that mentality of classification of society also has to change. Like, yes, you're a manager. Yes, you're a boss. You're not really a boss. You're a leader, or you're an influencer or somebody like that. So I think it comes from that place rather than people who are working and actually, making those decisions for themselves.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good positive change in that direction. Obviously, the fact we're even saying now, be a leader, not a manager kind of thing like that, that's a thing we're conscious of. And we're seeing that in the big tech companies these days are sort of leading it, right? With the first you hear is of the Googles and the Facebooks and the Twitters saying, yeah, we'll let all of our staff work from home until they have to. Yeah. I did have a point that July is the new January, just on that front, that everything's getting pushed out, and I liked that saying, but we won't dig into that too far because I think we slightly covered it there with the sickness thing. I'm going to slightly jump and I was going to try connect this with your government lead the way, maybe Parinita as well, to what I've just highlighted in my notes is the role of cash in society. So this one's UK based, but might be a little bit more widespread. But we've got a bit of a problem at the moment that a lot of rural areas are not able to access cash. Bank branches shut down. There's no ATMs in the area, and it's becoming a bit of a problem. And the government has been looking, they haven't put anything in place yet, at looking at different ways of sort of solving this issue. And there were some EU laws that made it difficult for cashbacks over the till from shops unless you bought something. So that made it really difficult. And there was a crazy high number of stuff like Sainsbury's and the convenience stores and so forth do quite a lot of the cashbacks, but they were looking at like reducing the laws so that you can just go get cash over the till from any shop you walk into. You can just say, hey, can I get some cash out, please, basically, which puts a lot of burden on the shops to have more cash and so forth. But what I was curious about when reading this was, and we're coming from a place of we'll have some bias based off, where we are and sort of how we live, so forth, almost similar to the transport that you mentioned with, depending on where you are and who you are, it affects you differently. But I've been relatively cashless for a little while. Very rarely do I need to have any cash on me. And I was just trying to think, like, what is, and I think it comes down to sort of small businesses and so forth is kind of the area that it's impacting. But I was just trying to think of what role does cash play in society? And then the government has been having a lot of discussions about whose responsibility it is to do something about it. So they're trying to say the FCA are the ones that need to sort of support and figure out how to prop this up. But the other side of my question is then looking at like China is a relatively probably one of the leading cashless societies out there. That, like, we all know cash is disappearing even before COVID made it dangerous to be handing money over to each other. Should we be trying to prop up something that we know is on a death spiral, for lack of a better term, or should we then put our focus on promoting and encouraging different ways? So looking at why do people need cash, and what's the adaptation we need? Is it because bank fees are too high to have a card machine? Is it because people don't have card machines in rural areas? I'm just curious to see what you guys think. Are you cashless? Do you think we should be trying to figure out more ways to let people access cash, or try to get them to adopt to a new way? Or is that, like we've sort of said on other things like autonomous vehicles, going to be quite too big a task for the short term?
Sorry, I do agree that it's too big a task for the short term, yes. But you're right. I can already see that I myself, yes. And I was thinking when you were talking about that, how, like, yeah, I barely have any cash in my wallet ever. It's always, some change here or there for transit. Sometimes I need that, but it's just, cards or I was actually thinking of Bitcoin when you were talking about this, because I'm like, everything is moving towards that. The biggest example of a system where money exchanges hands, or so to say, figuratively, is the stock market. But there's no cash. Like, if you think about it, it's all in it's all numbers, right? At the end of the day, it's all numbers and it's all electronic. It's not. There's nobody sitting and exchanging that cash. So I feel like cash has been obsolete for quite some time for certain industries and areas. Even when you go to the bank, it's. I was talking to a quant strategist one day, and he had. He actually recommended a book to me. I think it's called Dark Money, if I'm not mistaken, or I can correct that later if I find out. But he was telling me how that book was actually made the hypothesis that cash is actually, like, it is obsolete. It's all numbers at the end of the day, and it's all just numbers going up and down in your bank accounts, even when you look online, when you check it online, and you're sending money by e-transfers or just, making transfers from different accounts or whatever. We do this all the time. I'm sometimes representing real estate clients where I have to, prepare a check. They will send money to my account. Like, there's no cash. Like, everything happens online, and we just see the numbers going up and down, and subtractions or additions. So for me, like, cash is like, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. The only thing I can think of is that when I've had to think about getting cash is like taxis, where you've got to ask, sorry mate, do you take a card? And then no, all right. Well, can you drive me to an ATM on the way to my destination, please, so I can get out, run out, take out the minimum amount of cash I can just to cover this. And otherwise, I don't know. Oh, I used to think actually that the chip shop near me used to be minimum £5 on the card, otherwise they charge you. So if I just wanted some chips or something, I'd have to have a few quid on me. But even they are now taking card thanks to sort of COVID with no minimum. Those are the only two instances I could think of. What about you, Suraj, over in South Africa?
Yeah, in Africa, you would think firstly that, I mean, we have massive informal industry. So in South Africa, the informal industry probably accounts for 3 million people who work for the informal market, and therefore they would need cash, because they're growing their little bit of things, and they're making that they're selling things on the side of the road. But having said that, there's something called M-Pesa, MPE, making that they don't have the business that I think it was started in Kenya, and they've totally revolutionized mobile money. So and it's taken off in, like, it is total wildfire in Africa, in that people are also, even in the most rural areas, just for leaving money. Everything is M-Pesa. I'll just transfer it to you with a little SMS code, and then the money goes. So you can pay someone just from your phone, but with a little text message, and then the money shifts across in the M-Pesa wallets and things. So it's always interesting how even in Africa we've seen it in where technology can actually jump, can skip. You can skip technology. So in Africa, we the old landline, if you guys remember, you used to phone and all of those things. That skipped the poorer communities. They didn't have that, and then they went straight to mobile. And so I think, and in the same way, M-Pesa as a paying mechanism. The only problem here is that, and the biggest problem that I find, which is again universal, is the tooth fairy. How will the tooth fairy leave money? Because my daughter's tooth fell out 2 days ago, and luckily the tooth fairy had some money to leave under her pillow. Otherwise, what? We're going to be like, just the
Daughter's
child
going
must
to leave
leave
her sort code and her account number under the pillow.
Exactly, leave their numbers.
Gift card. You leave a gift card.
Oh, a gift card.
I was gonna
true.
say leave her a receipt and be like, you'll get £1 in 3 to 5 business days.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the bank will take 20p of it, so you really get 80.
Yeah, I think it was more the tooth fairy's wife had some money, and the problem was averted. But the tooth fairy himself, not a cash in sight, could not be found.
Yeah,
right.
Could not be
found.
found.
Yeah. I think, like we said with automated vehicles, I think we'll get there. China's sort of leading the way, and I'm sure there's maybe other examples, but like every store there just has their QR code, and that's how you exchange it. Similar to what you said, Suraj. You just whip out your phone, scan the code, 10, whatever it is, boom, it's gone, it's there. I think we'll start seeing that get adopted. We saw a little bit of change, obviously, similar like with Bitcoin, as you said, Perry. It went through a big buzz of there's Bitcoin ATMs, and there were shops where you could just buy things with that. I think that obviously slowed down the volatility of that market, made it not as appealing for that to be part of it. But I think we'll eventually just move there. Even now, people are just used to whipping out their phones rather than a card. So we're even getting to the point where you don't need your bank card. You just need your phone. And on my phone is 3 different cards. I just pick the card, put my fingerprint on, and boom, I can pay with that without even carrying anything around. So yeah, I think we're heading there. I think, like you said, COVID's been a good accelerator into people having to have a card machine available, and especially now when you can just literally plug it into your phone, and that connects to your bank, and you can take a credit card payment on the side of the street if you need to. Yeah, it should be interesting times. Well, yeah, that I think wraps us up nicely. Few weak transitions there, but I'll keep working on it.
You did well.
We jumped around not too bad. Harry, thanks so much for joining us. It's been fantastic to have you. Have a new voice to the show.
Yes,
always happy to help.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks so much. Everybody else, if you want to see more of Coffee with Centura, I guess it's a weekly show podcast, depending on how you're consuming this right now. We just jump in and talk business, chuck in some opinions here and there in a sort of lighthearted way. So join us every week. There's sort of smaller clips on LinkedIn, but we've got the full show on YouTube and most podcasting platforms. We got on Apple the other day, finally got approved through there, on Spotify and so forth as well. So if you want to consume us on all those platforms, please do. Helps us with the numbers. But otherwise, thanks so much, everybody, and I guess we'll see you next week.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.